scream tore out of Elena Voss before she even understood why she was screaming. One moment she was standing at the altar in a white gown stitched with silver thread, her hands trembling with hope. The next moment, she was on her knees in the dirt, her father's voice ringing through the crowd like a slammed door. "This wedding is cancelled. She is no longer part of this pack." The words did not make sense. They could not make sense. Hundreds of pack members stood in neat rows around the altar, dressed in their finest clothes, and every single one of them turned away from her at the exact same moment, as if they had rehearsed it. As if her humiliation was choreography they had all agreed to in advance. Elena searched the crowd for one face, just one, that might still be looking at her with kindness. She found nothing. Backs, shoulders, the silent language of rejection, spoken by an entire pack at once. "Father," her voice cracked on the single word. "What is happening? Where is Grant? Where is my groom?" Damien Voss did not answer her directly. He simply looked at the ground where she knelt, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Beside him stood the pack elders, their faces carved from stone, offering no explanation, no comfort, nothing. "You will understand in time," he said finally. "For now, you need to leave this territory, immediately." "Leave?" Elena stood, her knees weak beneath the weight of the gown. "This is my home. I have lived here my entire life. You cannot simply—" "The decision has been made." Her father's voice hardened into something she barely recognized. "The pack no longer claims you as one of its own. Your title, your protection, your place among us, all of it ends today." A woman somewhere in the crowd let out a soft gasp, quickly stifled. No one moved to help her. No one dared. Elena felt something break inside her chest, quiet and total, like a bone snapping beneath skin that showed no bruise. She had spent her whole life believing that loyalty meant something in the pack. She had watched her father lead meetings about honor, about the sacred bond between wolf and family, about how a pack that abandoned its own was no pack at all. And now he was the one doing the abandoning. "Why?" she whispered. "At least tell me why." For a moment, something flickered across her father's face. Not quite regret, not quite guilt, something closer to fear, quickly buried beneath his usual composure. "Some things are bigger than you, Elena. Bigger than this wedding. You will thank me one day for what I am doing." She wanted to laugh at the cruelty of that sentence, but no laughter came. Only a hollow ache spreading through her ribs. The elders stepped forward then, forming a wall between her and the rest of the gathering, as though she were something dangerous, something to be contained rather than comforted. One of them, an older woman named Greta who had once braided Elena's hair when she was a child, would not even look at her now. "Take off the gown," Greta said quietly. "It does not belong to you anymore." "You are joking." Elena's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "You raised me. You held me the night my mother died, and now you cannot even look at me?" Greta's silence was its own kind of answer. Elena turned in a slow circle, searching every face for a single ally, a single person willing to break formation and stand beside her. The silence stretched unbearably long. Somewhere in the back of the crowd, a young man she recognized as her childhood friend, Colin, met her eyes for half a second before looking away, shame written plainly across his face. Even Colin. Even the boy who had once promised to always have her back. The truth settled over her like ice water. This was not a mistake. This was not some elder's overreaction that her father would correct once he calmed down. This had been planned, organized. Every member of the pack had known this moment was coming, had rehearsed their silence, had prepared themselves to watch her fall, without lifting a single hand to catch her. Only she had been kept in the dark. "Fine," she said, and the word came out steadier than she expected. "Fine. I will go. But I want everyone here to remember this moment. I want you to remember what kind of pack you chose to be today." No one answered. No one needed to. The silence was answer enough. She turned from the altar, her gown dragging heavy through the dirt, and began walking toward the tree line at the edge of pack territory. Behind her, she heard the murmur of the crowd finally breaking into whispered conversation, the kind of hushed gossip that always followed disaster. She did not turn back to hear what they said. She already knew it would not be kind. The forest swallowed her within minutes, the trees rising tall and dark around her, blocking out the last of the afternoon light. She kept walking, not caring where her feet took her, only caring that each step put more distance between herself and the people who had just cast her aside like something broken and unwanted. Branches caught at the delicate fabric of her gown, tearing small holes that she did not bother to notice. Her bare feet, stripped of the ceremonial shoes she had discarded somewhere behind her, pressed against roots and stones, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the wound still bleeding somewhere beneath her ribs. She thought of Grant, her intended groom, a quiet man from a neighboring pack, who she had met only a handful of times before their families arranged the match. She had not loved him, not yet, but she had hoped. She had allowed herself, foolishly, to imagine a future where she belonged somewhere fully, where her place in the world was settled and safe. Now even that small hope had been taken from her, along with everything else. The sound of her own breathing grew loud in her ears as she pushed deeper into unfamiliar woods. She had never ventured this far from pack territory before. The trees here grew thicker, older, twisted with age, in ways that made the forest feel like it was watching her. A distant howl rose somewhere far ahead, low and mournful, and Elena froze mid-step. She was not foolish enough to believe the wilderness was safe, simply because her own pack had failed her. Unclaimed land between territories belonged to no one, which meant it also protected no one. She should turn back, she knew that. But turning back meant returning to a place that no longer wanted her, standing outside gates that would not open, becoming a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that had already moved on without her. She kept walking instead. The light continued to fade as evening pressed down through the canopy. Elena's arms wrapped tightly around herself, though the gown offered little warmth against the cooling air. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, both from the walking and from the storm of emotion she had barely begun to process. Grief, confusion, a slow, simmering anger that had not yet found its full shape. Why would her own father do this? What could possibly be bigger than his daughter's wedding? Bigger than his daughter's place within the only home she had ever known? The elder's silence bothered her more than her father's words. They had known. All of them had known, and none of them had warned her. She stumbled over an exposed root and caught herself against the rough bark of a tree, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking now, not from cold but from the sheer weight of everything crashing down at once. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Elena's whole body went rigid. She turned slowly, scanning the darkening trees, searching for the source of the sound. Nothing moved. The forest had gone unnervingly quiet, the way it sometimes did right before a predator revealed itself. "Hello?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Is someone there?" Silence answered her, thick and unbroken. She told herself it was nothing. An animal. The wind. Her own frayed nerves playing tricks. She turned to keep walking, and nearly screamed when she found herself facing a wall of solid black fur only a few feet away. The wolf standing before her was unlike anything she had ever seen. Larger than any wolf in her father's pack. Its shoulders alone rose higher than her waist, its dark coat seeming to absorb what little light remained in the forest. Its eyes, though, were what stopped her breath entirely. Silver, almost glowing, fixed on her, with an intensity that felt less like a predator sizing up prey, and more like something else entirely, something that looked, impossibly, like recognition. Elena did not move. Every instinct told her that running would be the worst possible choice, that this creature could close the distance between them before she managed even 3 steps. She forced herself to stay still, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain the wolf could hear it. The wolf did not lunge, it did not growl, it simply watched her, its massive head tilted slightly, as though it were as surprised by her presence as she was by its own. Long seconds passed in that frozen silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, the wolf took a single step back, putting distance between them rather than closing it. Elena's chest loosened slightly, though her legs still refused to fully cooperate. "I do not know what you are," she whispered, "but I do not have anything left for you to take. Everything has already been taken from me today." The wolf's ears flicked at the sound of her voice, and for a strange, suspended moment, Elena could have sworn she saw something almost like understanding flash across those silver eyes. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and vanished into the darkness of the trees, leaving Elena alone once more in the unfamiliar forest, her heart still racing, her mind spinning with a question she could not begin to answer. What had that been? She did not have long to wonder. Her body, having run on adrenaline and heartbreak for hours, finally began to fail her. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her legs, exhausted from walking and shaking from shock, buckled beneath her. The last thing Elena registered before darkness swallowed her whole was the distant sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving quickly toward her through the trees. Someone, or something, was coming. And then there was nothing at all. Warmth. That was the first thing Elena noticed when her mind began to surface again. Warmth pressing against her side, along with the crackle of a fire somewhere nearby. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to firelight dancing across the wooden beams of an unfamiliar ceiling. She was lying on a bed far softer than her own, covered in a thick blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Her torn wedding gown had been replaced with a simple linen shirt, far too large for her frame. Panic surged through her, and she sat up too quickly, her head spinning with the sudden movement. Careful. A deep voice cut through the quiet room, calm but firm. You collapsed from exhaustion. Moving too fast will only make it worse. Elena's eyes snapped toward the sound. A man stood near the fireplace, his back partially turned, as he added another log to the flames. Even from behind, something about him radiated authority, a stillness that felt less like calm and more like restrained power. When he finally turned to face her, Elena found herself unable to look away. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, with dark hair that fell just past his brow, and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was a scar along his jaw, faint but noticeable, the kind of mark that spoke of old battles rather than careless accidents. But it was his eyes that held her still, sharp, assessing, and yet strangely gentle when they settled on her. "Where am I?" Elena's voice came out hoarse. "Who are you?" "You are safe," the man said simply, moving closer but stopping a respectful distance from the bed. "That is what matters most right now." "That does not answer my question." A faint, almost amused expression crossed his face. "No, it does not. But you have been through enough for one day. Answers can wait until you have eaten something." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to demand a full explanation immediately, but her body betrayed her with a soft growl of hunger that made the stranger's mouth twitch with the ghost of a smile. "As I said," he gestured toward a tray on the table beside the bed, filled with bread, roasted meat, and a steaming cup of something that smelled like herbs and honey. "Eat first." Reluctantly, Elena accepted the food, watching him carefully over each bite, as though he might vanish, or worse, reveal some hidden danger she had not yet detected. But he simply stood near the window, giving her space, his gaze occasionally drifting to the darkness outside. "You found me in the forest," she finally said, piecing together fragments of memory. "There was a wolf, a large black wolf." Something shifted subtly in his expression. "Yes, I found you." "Was that you? The wolf?" He did not answer immediately, which told her more than words could have. Elena's grip tightened around the cup in her hands. "You should know," he said slowly, "that where you are standing right now is neutral ground. Land that belongs to no single pack, but is protected all the same. You are safe here, whether or not you choose to trust me. That still does not tell me who you are." The corner of his mouth lifted again, though there was something guarded behind the expression this time. "My name is Ronan Blackthorn." The name settled into the room like a stone dropped into still water. Elena had heard that name before, whispered in hushed, reverent tones during pack gatherings, spoken of as though he were more legend than man. The Alpha King, the one leader every pack answered to, whether they wished to or not, the wolf whose strength was said to be unmatched across every territory. "You are the Alpha King," she said slowly, disbelief coloring her voice. "The Ronan Blackthorn. I see my reputation precedes me." Elena set the cup down carefully, her mind racing to catch up with this new, impossible information. Why would the Alpha King be wandering the forest alone, without an escort, without any guards? "I go where I please," Ronan said simply. "It is one of the few privileges of my position." She studied him, searching for some sign of mockery or deceit, but found none. Only quiet, unshakable confidence, the kind that came from a lifetime of never having to prove himself to anyone. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Something flickered behind his storm-gray eyes, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Perhaps I simply do not enjoy watching someone suffer alone in the dark, especially when that suffering was placed upon them unfairly. You know what happened to me? I know enough, he said carefully. News travels quickly between territories, even to neutral ground. A pack abandoning one of its own at the altar is not something that stays quiet for long. Shame burned hot across Elena's cheeks. Of course he knew. Of course everyone would know soon enough, if they did not already. She was no longer simply Elena Voss. She was the girl her own pack had discarded in front of hundreds of witnesses, a cautionary tale whispered at gatherings for years to come. Then you already understand why I have nothing left to offer anyone, she said quietly, bitterness sharpening her words. No pack, no status, no family willing to claim me. I am nobody now. Ronan crossed the room in a few measured strides, kneeling beside the bed so that his eyes were level with hers, an act that stunned her into silence. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf across every territory, kneeling before her as though she were the one who held authority in the room. You are wrong, he said, his voice low but certain. A pack's decision to abandon you says everything about their character and absolutely nothing about your worth. Do not confuse the two. Elena's throat tightened unexpectedly. No one, not even her own father, had spoken to her with such conviction since the disaster at the altar. You do not know me well enough to say that. Perhaps not yet. Something in his gaze deepened, an intensity that made her pulse quicken, for reasons she did not fully understand. But I intend to learn. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than either of them acknowledged aloud. Elena searched his face, waiting for the catch, the hidden motive that powerful men like him always seem to carry. She found none, only steady, unflinching honesty that unsettled her more than any lie could have. What happens now? She asked eventually. You cannot simply keep a stranger in your home indefinitely. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need, Ronan said, rising to his feet once more. No conditions attached, no expectations. This is neutral ground, and you are under my protection for as long as you require it. Why would you offer that to someone you met only hours ago? He paused near the door, glancing back at her with an expression she could not quite name. Some instincts cannot be explained, only trusted. Before she could press further, he stepped out of the room, leaving her alone, with her thoughts and the crackling fire. Elena sat in the quiet for a long time afterward, turning his words over in her mind, trying to understand the strange pull she felt toward this powerful stranger, who had appeared out of nowhere, to catch her, when her entire world collapsed. Sleep did not come easily that night, though exhaustion weighed heavy on her body. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crowd turning their backs on her, her father's cold refusal to explain himself, the elders' silent complicity. But beneath those painful memories, she also saw silver eyes watching her in the dark forest, and gray eyes kneeling beside her bed, offering safety without asking for anything in return. She did not know what to make of Ronan Blackthorne. She only knew that for the first time since the wedding collapsed around her, she did not feel entirely alone. Near dawn, she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, unaware that outside her door, Ronan remained awake through the night, standing guard over a woman his instincts told him was far more important to his future than she yet realized. Word of her arrival at his stronghold had already begun to spread by morning. Messengers moved quickly between territories, carrying whispers of the abandoned bride, now sheltered beneath the Alpha King's roof. In distant halls, pack leaders exchanged uneasy glances, wondering what this unexpected development might mean. And in the Voss pack, Damien sat alone in his study, long after the household had gone quiet, staring at an old, faded letter he had kept hidden for over 20 years, his hands trembling with the weight of a truth he had spent 2 decades trying to bury. The wedding disaster he had orchestrated was meant to protect his daughter, not destroy her. But watching her walk away into the darkness of the forest, he had felt something break inside himself as well. A quiet, creeping fear that his desperate plan to keep her hidden had failed the moment she crossed into the one territory he feared most. The Alpha King's territory. If Ronan Blackthorne discovered the truth Damien had spent so long concealing, everything the Voss pack had built to protect their secrets would collapse entirely. And Elena, the daughter he claimed to be protecting, would be caught directly in the center of the storm that followed. 3 days passed before Elena felt strong enough to leave the room she had been given, and even then, She moved through the halls of Ronan's stronghold with the cautious steps of someone who still expected the ground to disappear beneath her. The stronghold itself was unlike anything she had known growing up within the Voss pack. Where her old home had been comfortable but modest, Ronan's territory stretched across land so vast she could not see its borders from any window. Stone walls rose high and solid, carved with symbols she did not recognize, and warriors moved through the courtyards with a discipline that spoke of years of training rather than mere obligation. Everywhere she walked, eyes followed her, curious and cautious in equal measure. She was, after all, an outsider, and worse, an outsider with no pack to claim her. Whispers trailed her through the corridors, though none of the warriors dared speak directly to her without Ronan present. She found him one morning in a wide training yard, sparring with a much younger wolf who could not have been more than 17. Elena paused at the edge of the yard, watching as Ronan moved with a precision that seemed almost effortless, each strike calculated, each defense flawless, yet somehow never careless with the strength he clearly possessed. When the young warrior finally yielded, breathless and grinning, despite his loss, Ronan clasped his shoulder with something like genuine warmth, before sending him off to rest. "You are staring," Ronan said without turning around, and Elena startled, embarrassed to have been caught. "I was simply curious how the Alpha King spends his mornings." He turned then, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Training keeps a pack disciplined. It also keeps me honest about my own limits." "I did not realize you had any." "Everyone has limits, Elena, even kings." He studied her for a moment, something thoughtful passing behind his eyes. "You look stronger today." "I feel stronger," she admitted, surprised to realize it was true. The bone-deep exhaustion that had gripped her since the wedding had begun to loosen its hold, replaced by something closer to clarity. "Though I still do not fully understand why you continue to help me. Would you prefer I stopped?" "No," she said quickly, then flushed at how immediate her answer had been. "I simply do not want to become a burden you regret taking on." Ronan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You are not a burden. If anything, your presence here has raised questions I did not expect to be asking myself." "What kind of questions?" He hesitated, an unusual pause for a man who seemed to carry such effortless confidence in everything he did. "Questions I am not yet ready to answer. Forgive me for being cautious. It is a habit that has served me well over the years." Before Elena could press further, a commotion near the main gate drew both their attention. A messenger, breathless and travel-worn, rushed into the courtyard, dropping to one knee, before Ronan with practiced urgency. "My lord, emissaries have arrived from the Voss territory. They request an audience regarding the woman under your protection." Elena's stomach dropped. Her pack, the same pack that had abandoned her without explanation only days ago, was now sending representatives to reclaim her. The timing felt suspicious rather than remorseful, though she could not yet articulate why. "Send them to the main hall," Ronan said, his voice shifting instantly into something harder, more commanding. "I will meet with them shortly." As the messenger hurried away, Ronan turned back to Elena, his expression softening slightly, though the tension in his shoulders remained. "You do not have to see them if you are not ready." "No," Elena said, straightening her spine, despite the fear coiling in her chest. "I want to hear what they have to say. I deserve that much, at least." Ronan studied her for a long moment before nodding, respect evident in his gaze. "Then you shall have it, but you will not face them alone." The main hall, when they arrived, was already filled with tension thick enough to taste. Two emissaries from the Voss pack stood near the entrance, dressed in formal attire that did little to disguise their obvious discomfort. Elena recognized one of them immediately, an elder named Marcus, who had served as her father's closest advisor for as long as she could remember. "Elena," Marcus's voice carried forced warmth as he stepped forward. "We are relieved to see you safe. Your father has been beside himself with worry." "Has he?" Elena's tone remained flat, unimpressed. Strange, considering he was the one who ordered me removed from pack territory in front of the entire gathering. Marcus's composure flickered, just slightly. "There were circumstances your father could not fully explain at the time. Circumstances that required delicate handling." "Then explain them now." "That conversation would be better had privately, between family." I no longer have a family, according to my father's own words, Elena said, her voice steady, despite the tremor she felt building beneath her ribs. You made that quite clear at the altar. Ronan, standing silently beside her until this point, finally spoke, his voice carrying an authority that immediately shifted the balance of the room. The lady has made her position clear. If you have something to discuss regarding her circumstances, you may speak freely here, in my presence. Marcus's eyes flicked nervously toward Ronan, clearly recalculating his approach now that the Alpha King had inserted himself directly into the conversation. My lord, this is a matter internal to the Voss pack. We simply wish to bring Elena home, where she belongs. She belongs wherever she chooses to belong, Ronan replied evenly. And from what I have observed, your pack forfeited any claim to her the moment they abandoned her without cause. There were reasons, Marcus insisted, a note of desperation creeping into his voice now. Reasons that concern matters far beyond a simple wedding. Elena's attention sharpened immediately. What reasons? Tell me. Tell me right now, or leave this hall and do not return. Marcus glanced at his fellow emissary, some silent communication passing between them before he finally spoke again, choosing his words with obvious care. Your lineage, Elena. There are aspects of your bloodline that your father believed needed to remain hidden for your own protection. My bloodline? Elena's confusion deepened. What are you talking about? That is not a conversation for this setting, Marcus said quickly, retreating from the topic as fast as he had approached it. Please, simply return with us. Your father wishes to explain everything himself, in private. After everything that has happened, you expect me to simply follow you back into a home that discarded me without warning? Elena's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. Absolutely not. If my father wishes to explain himself, he may come here and do so directly, in front of the same audience he chose to humiliate me before. Marcus's expression tightened with frustration, though he clearly recognized he had no authority to force her compliance, not while standing on the Alpha King's territory, surrounded by warriors loyal to Ronan alone. This is not wise, Elena, he warned. Remaining here, under the protection of the Alpha King, complicates matters far more than you realize. Complicates matters for whom? Ronan interjected, his voice low and dangerous now. For your pack's carefully guarded secrets, perhaps. Marcus said nothing, though the color draining from his face spoke volumes. Ronan stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Elena and the emissaries, an unmistakable gesture of protection that did not go unnoticed by anyone in the room. You may return to your pack, Ronan said firmly, and deliver this message. Elena remains under my protection, for as long as she wishes. If Damien Voss has explanations to offer his daughter, he is welcome to offer them himself, honestly and completely, rather than sending others to do his difficult work for him. Marcus opened his mouth as though to argue further, then seemed to think better of it, offering a stiff bow instead before gathering his companion and exiting the hall in tense silence. Once they were gone, Elena released a breath she had not realized she was holding, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Ronan turned to her immediately, concern replacing the hard authority that had colored his expression moments before. Are you all right? I do not know, Elena admitted honestly. My bloodline? What could possibly be so significant about my bloodline that it required abandoning me at my own wedding? I do not know either, Ronan said carefully, but I intend to find out, if you will allow me to help you uncover the truth. Elena studied him, this powerful stranger, who had already done more to protect her in a matter of days than her own family had done in years. Something in his steady, unwavering presence made her want to trust him completely, though caution still whispered at the edges of her thoughts. Why does this matter so much to you? She asked quietly. My problems are not yours to solve. Ronan's gaze softened, something vulnerable flickering briefly beneath his usually composed exterior. Perhaps I simply cannot stand by and watch injustice unfold in front of me. Or perhaps, he added, his voice dropping lower, there is something about you that feels far more significant than either of us yet understands. The words settled between them, heavy with implication neither was ready to fully explore. Elena felt her heart quicken, uncertain whether the sensation stemmed from fear, curiosity, or something else entirely, something she was not yet prepared to name. Whatever the truth about her bloodline turned out to be, she understood now that there would be no escaping it. Her father's secrets, buried for years, had finally begun clawing their way toward the surface, and she stood directly in their path, with only the Alpha King standing beside her as her shield against whatever storm was coming. News of the emissary's failed visit spread through the stronghold within hours, and by the following morning, Elena could feel the shift in how the warriors regarded her. Where curiosity had once colored their glances, something closer to quiet respect had begun to take its place, as though word had traveled that she had stood her ground against her own pack's representatives without flinching. She found the attention uncomfortable, unfamiliar territory, after years of being the quiet, dutiful daughter, expected to accept whatever decisions her father made on her behalf. But there was also something freeing in it, a small, unfamiliar sense of agency she had never been permitted to hold before. Ronan found her that afternoon, in the stronghold's garden, a quiet space tucked behind the main hall, where late-season flowers still clung stubbornly to their blooms despite the approaching cold. She sat on a stone bench, turning a fallen leaf between her fingers, lost in thought. "You disappeared after breakfast," he said, settling onto the bench beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, despite the cool air. "I wondered if the visit yesterday had upset you more than you let on." "It did," Elena admitted, "though not in the way you might expect. I keep turning Marcus's words over in my mind, trying to understand what could possibly be hidden in my bloodline that would justify what my father did." "Have you considered that the explanation might involve your mother?" Ronan asked carefully. "You have mentioned her only briefly since arriving. May I ask what happened to her?" Elena's fingers stilled on the leaf. "She died when I was young. My father never spoke of her much afterward. I always assumed it was simply too painful for him." "Do you remember anything about her?" "Her family, where she came from before joining the Voss pack." Elena frowned, searching memories that had grown hazy with time. "Not much. I know she was not born within our territory. My father met her while traveling, though he never explained the circumstances in detail. There is a portrait of her in the old wing of our home, but that is nearly all I have left of her." "What was her name?" "Miriam." The name felt strange on her tongue after so many years of rarely speaking it aloud. "Miriam Voss, though I suppose that was not always her name." Ronan's expression grew thoughtful, something calculating passing behind his storm-colored eyes. "I would like to make some inquiries, if you permit it. Discreetly, of course. It may be that your mother's origins hold the key to understanding what your father has been hiding." "You would do that for me?" "I already told you," Ronan said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your fate matters to me more than either of us fully understands, yet uncovering the truth feels like the least I can offer." Elena studied him for a long moment, marveling at how naturally trust had begun forming between them despite the short time they had known each other. It defied every instinct she had been raised with, every lesson about caution and self-reliance that her upbringing had instilled in her. And yet, sitting beside him in the quiet garden, she felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Safety that did not come with conditions attached. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I do not think I have properly said that yet." "You do not need to thank me," Ronan replied, though something in his expression suggested her words had affected him more than he let show. "Just promise me, you will continue trusting your own strength through whatever comes next. Whatever your father has been hiding, you are more than capable of facing it." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a warrior Elena had come to recognize as one of Ronan's most trusted advisors, a sharp-eyed woman named Sophia, who oversaw much of the stronghold's daily operations. "My lord," Sophia said, bowing briefly before continuing, "a courier has arrived, with information you requested. It concerns the matter you asked me to investigate." Ronan rose immediately, his expression shifting into something more alert. "Send them to my study. I will meet with them shortly." He turned back to Elena, apology evident in his eyes. "Forgive the interruption. Duty rarely waits patiently." "Go," Elena said, offering a small smile, despite the curiosity gnawing at her. "I will be here." She watched him disappear into the stronghold, Sophia trailing close behind, and found herself wondering what information could have arrived so quickly regarding a request Ronan had apparently already made before their conversation in the garden. Had he begun investigating her mother's history even before she had confirmed the details herself? The thought unsettled her slightly, though not entirely unpleasantly. It suggested a level of attentiveness and foresight that felt both flattering and slightly overwhelming, evidence that Ronan had been thinking of her welfare even in moments she had not witnessed. Elena remained in the garden long after he departed, watching the afternoon light shift and fade across the stone pathways, her mind circling endlessly around the mystery of her mother's origins and her father's carefully guarded secrets. Somewhere in that tangled history lay the answer to why she had been abandoned so publicly, so cruelly, without so much as an explanation offered to soften the blow. As evening approached, she made her way back toward her quarters, only to find Sophia waiting near the entrance, an unreadable expression on her face. "The Alpha King requests your presence in his study," Sophia said. "He says the matter cannot wait until morning." Elena's heart quickened as she followed Sophia through the winding stone corridors toward the private wing of the stronghold she had not yet fully explored. When they arrived, Ronan stood near his desk, several documents spread before him, his expression grave in a way that immediately set her nerves on edge. "What did you find?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Ronan gestured toward a chair, waiting until she settled before speaking. "The courier who arrived today came from a contact of mine within the Northern Territories, an old friend who owes me several favors. I asked him to search for any record of a woman named Miriam, matching your mother's description, someone who left her original pack roughly 25 years ago." "And? Did he find anything?" "He found a great deal," Ronan said carefully, "though I suspect it will raise more questions than it answers." Elena's hands tightened in her lap. "Please, just tell me." Ronan met her eyes steadily. "Your mother was not simply an outsider who happened to marry into the Voss pack. According to the records my contact uncovered, Miriam was born into a bloodline considered extremely rare among our kind, one believed by many to have died out generations ago." "What kind of bloodline?" Ronan hesitated, choosing his next words with obvious care. "A bloodline connected to what the old stories call true mates, a rare and powerful genetic thread that, when it appears, cannot be broken or denied by any external force, including arranged marriages, political alliances, or pact decisions." Elena stared at him, struggling to absorb the implications of what he was suggesting. "You believe my mother carried this bloodline, and that I inherited it as well? It would explain a great deal," Ronan said quietly, "including why your father worked so hard to keep your lineage hidden, and why he panicked so severely once your presence here, on my territory, became known throughout every pack." The pieces began falling into place with dizzying speed. "You think he was afraid that if this bloodline connected me to someone specific, someone he could not control, it would upend whatever alliance he was trying to secure through my marriage to Grant?" "That is precisely what I believe," Ronan confirmed, though something guarded remained in his expression, something he had not yet fully revealed. "Bloodlines like this are exceptionally rare, Elena. In all my years as Alpha King, I have encountered stories of them, but never proof, until now." "What are you not telling me?" Elena asked, sensing the hesitation still lingering beneath his careful words. Ronan was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There is a reason I found you so easily in that forest, Elena. A reason my instincts pulled me toward you the moment I sensed your presence on neutral ground." Understanding began to dawn, slow and disorienting, though she could not yet fully accept what he seemed to be suggesting. "Ronan, what are you saying?" "I am saying," he said softly, rising from his desk to kneel before her chair, much as he had that very first night, "that the bond connecting us may not be coincidence at all. It may be exactly what the old stories describe, a bond that was always meant to exist between us, hidden and suppressed until the moment fate refused to be denied any longer." Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. The revelation settled over her, both terrifying and impossibly clarifying, illuminating every strange, unexplainable pull she had felt toward him since the moment she collapsed at his feet in the darkness of the forest. Her wedding had not been destroyed by cruelty alone. It had been destroyed because somewhere, deep within her own bloodline, fate had already chosen a different path for her, one that led directly to the Alpha King, kneeling before her now, waiting patiently for her to catch up to a truth he had perhaps already sensed from their very first meeting. Sleep refused to come easily that night. Elena lay awake long after the candles in her room burned low, replaying Ronan's words over and over in her mind, until they blurred together into a single overwhelming truth she still struggled to fully accept. a bond that was always meant to exist between them. The idea felt too large to hold, too significant to simply absorb in a single evening, especially so soon after the devastating collapse of her wedding, to a man she had never loved, but had at least believed she understood her role beside. Now everything she thought she understood about her own life had been rewritten in the span of a single conversation. She rose before dawn, unable to bear the stillness of her room any longer, and wandered the quiet corridors of the stronghold as pale light began creeping through the windows. The building felt different in the early hours, peaceful in a way that allowed her scattered thoughts room to settle. She found herself drawn toward the small library tucked into the eastern wing, a room she had discovered during her wanderings but had not yet properly explored. Shelves lined every wall, filled with texts far older than anything she had encountered within her own pack's more modest collection. Could not sleep either? Elena turned to find Ronan standing in the doorway, dressed simply, his usual composed authority softened slightly by the early hour, and the faint shadows beneath his eyes, suggesting he had slept as little as she had. Too much to think about, she admitted. I imagine so. He stepped further into the room, gesturing toward the shelves around them. This collection holds some of the oldest records kept by any pack across the territories. If you wish, we could search together for more information about the bloodline your mother carried. Elena nodded, grateful for a task that might quiet the restless spiral of her thoughts. They spent the following hours combing through ancient texts, some so fragile that pages threatened to crumble with careless handling, searching for any mention of the rare lineage Ronan had described. The work proved slow and often frustrating, filled with vague references and half-finished stories that offered more mystery than clarity. But gradually, fragments began to accumulate, painting a picture of a bloodline that had, according to legend, been deliberately hunted and suppressed generations ago by pack leaders who feared its power to disrupt carefully constructed alliances. Here, Ronan said eventually, drawing her attention to a passage in a particularly weathered volume. This describes exactly what your father may have feared. It says that when someone carrying this bloodline forms a bond with a ruling alpha, the connection cannot be undone by any external decree, not even one issued by pack elders or family authority. So my father was not simply hiding my heritage to protect old family secrets, Elena said slowly, understanding solidifying with uncomfortable clarity. He was actively trying to prevent this exact outcome from ever happening. It would seem so, Ronan agreed, which raises an important question. How did he even know to fear it, unless he already suspected, or perhaps confirmed, that your bloodline carried this trait? Elena's stomach twisted with the implication. You think he knew all along, that this was not some recent discovery, but something he has been hiding since before I was even born? I think it is possible, Ronan said carefully, though we cannot know for certain without speaking to him directly. The thought of facing her father again, after everything that had happened, filled Elena with a complicated tangle of emotions she was not yet ready to untangle. Anger, certainly, but also a lingering, painful hope that perhaps some explanation existed that might make sense of the cruelty she had endured. I am not ready to see him, she admitted quietly. Not yet. Then we will wait, Ronan said without hesitation, until you are. His willingness to simply defer to her comfort, without pressure or impatience, struck Elena as remarkable, given everything else occupying his responsibilities as Alpha King. She studied him for a long moment, noticing the quiet patience etched into his expression, the way he seemed content to let her set the pace of their unfolding story, rather than rushing toward conclusions neither of them yet fully understood. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. Of course. Why have you never taken a mate before now? Surely someone in your position has faced countless opportunities. Ronan's expression grew thoughtful, something guarded flickering briefly across his features before he answered. I have faced many expectations, certainly. Alliances suggested by advisors, matches proposed by neighboring packs hoping to secure favor, but none of them ever felt right. I always assumed, perhaps foolishly, that I would simply know when the correct bond presented itself. And did you? No, I mean, from the moment you found me in the forest? I suspected, he admitted, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than she had yet heard it. Something about your presence called to instincts I did not fully understand at the time. It was only once I confirmed your lineage, that the pieces began falling into place. Elena's heart quickened at his honesty, at the vulnerability he allowed himself to show despite his position, despite the strength and authority that defined so much of how the world perceived him. "I do not know how to feel about any of this," she confessed. "Everything has happened so quickly. Only days ago, I believed my future was settled, however imperfectly. Now I do not know what my future holds at all." "You do not need to have all the answers right now," Ronan said gently. "This bond, if it is truly what the old texts describe, does not require you to rush toward any particular outcome. We can simply continue learning about each other, allowing whatever exists between us to develop naturally, without pressure from either of our positions." The offer eased something tight in Elena's chest, a fear she had not fully acknowledged until he addressed it directly. She had worried, somewhere beneath the surface, that discovering this bond meant her choices had been stripped away entirely, replaced by fate's predetermined path. Ronan's words reassured her that whatever connection existed between them still left room for her own agency, her own voice, in shaping what came next. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding that. You have spent your entire life having decisions made for you without your consent," Ronan replied, his gaze steady and sincere. "I have no intention of adding myself to that list of people who failed to honor your voice." The sentiment settled warmly in her chest, chasing away some of the lingering chill that had gripped her since the disaster at the altar. For the first time since her world collapsed, Elena allowed herself to imagine a future that did not feel entirely dictated by others, a future where her own choices, however uncertain, might finally hold real weight. They continued their research through the remainder of the morning, gradually building a clearer picture of the bloodline that connected her to a legacy far older and more significant than she had ever imagined. But even as understanding grew, new questions emerged alongside it. Questions about her mother's true origins, about what else her father might be hiding, and about the elders who had stood silent witness to her humiliation, despite clearly knowing the truth all along. Whatever answers remained buried within her family's carefully guarded secrets, Elena understood now that uncovering them would require confronting her past directly, no matter how painful that confrontation might prove to be. And when that moment finally arrived, she would not face it alone. A week passed before Elena found the courage she needed, and it arrived not through careful planning, but through an unexpected visitor who appeared at the stronghold gates without warning. She was in the training yard, watching Ronan work with a group of younger warriors, when Sophia approached with an expression tight with concern. "My lady," Sophia said, the title still unfamiliar to Elena's ears, despite having heard it several times over the past week. "There is someone at the gate asking for you. She says her name is Greta." Elena's breath caught. Greta, the elder who had braided her hair as a child, who had refused to look at her the day of the wedding disaster. She had not expected to see any familiar face from her old pack again so soon, especially not one that had stood silently complicit in her humiliation. "Send her away," Elena said, surprising herself with the sharpness in her own voice. "Elena," Ronan had crossed the yard quickly, his sparring partner forgotten. "Are you certain? This may be an opportunity to learn something important." Elena hesitated, torn between the protective anger still simmering beneath her ribs, and the persistent curiosity that had driven her research alongside Ronan over the past week. Why would she come here now, after everything? Perhaps guilt finally caught up with her, Ronan suggested gently. Or perhaps she carries information she was too afraid to share before. Either way, the choice remains yours entirely. I will support whatever you decide. After a long moment, Elena nodded slowly. "Bring her to the garden. I will speak with her there." Greta looked older than Elena remembered, her shoulders bowed with a weight that seemed to have grown heavier since the wedding. When she entered the garden, she hesitated at the threshold, clearly uncertain of her welcome. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "I am not certain yet that agreeing was the right decision," Elena replied, keeping her voice carefully controlled. "Why have you come?" Greta lowered herself onto the stone bench across from Elena, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I have carried guilt since the day of your wedding, guilt heavier than I know how to properly express. I should have warned you. I should have found some way to prepare you for what was coming, regardless of what the elders demanded of my silence." "Then why did you not?" "Because I was afraid," Greta admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "Your father swore all of us to secrecy years ago, long before you were even old enough to understand what was happening. He told us that revealing your lineage would place you in grave danger, that keeping the truth hidden was the only way to protect you from forces far more dangerous than a difficult wedding day. What forces? Elena pressed, leaning forward. Please, Greta, I am tired of half explanations and vague warnings. If you know something, tell me plainly. Greta glanced nervously toward Ronan, who stood a respectful distance away, near the garden entrance, before returning her attention to Elena. Your mother's bloodline was known to certain enemies of our pack, powerful figures who believed that anyone carrying such rare heritage should be captured and controlled rather than allowed to live freely. Your father believed that if word of your lineage spread too widely, too soon, those enemies would seek you out before you were strong enough to protect yourself. So he chose to humiliate me publicly instead, to abandon me in front of hundreds of witnesses rather than simply explaining the danger and helping me prepare for it. He panicked, Greta said softly. When he learned that the arranged marriage negotiations had somehow reached the ears of the very enemies he feared, he believed the only way to protect you was to sever all connection to the pack immediately, publicly, so that no one would suspect any lingering value in pursuing you. He believed pushing you away, however cruel it appeared, would keep you safer than any alternative he could construct. Elena sat in stunned silence, struggling to reconcile this explanation with the cold, dismissive man who had refused to even meet her eyes as she knelt in the dirt. That does not excuse what he did. There were other ways, gentler ways, to protect me without shattering everything I believed about my place in this world. I know, Greta said, tears finally spilling down her weathered cheeks. I have told him the same thing, more than once, since that terrible day. But your father has always believed that harsh action equals effective protection, even when it costs him the people he claims to care about most. Elena absorbed this information slowly, feeling old wounds shift and reshape themselves around this new context, though the pain of that public humiliation remained sharp, despite the explanation offered. Who are these enemies you speak of? The ones who sought to capture bloodlines like mine? Greta's expression grew grave. A group operating largely outside the recognized territories, led by a figure known only as the Hollow. They have spent decades hunting rare bloodlines across every pack, seeking to control or eliminate anyone whose heritage threatens the balance of power they hope to establish for themselves. Ronan, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally stepped forward, his expression darkening considerably at the mention of this name. The Hollow. I have heard whispers of this group before, though I confess I never took the rumors as seriously as perhaps I should have. They are very real, Greta confirmed, her voice trembling slightly. And now that Elena's presence here, under your protection, has become known across every territory, I fear her connection to you may draw exactly the kind of attention her father worked so hard to avoid. The weight of this revelation settled heavily over the garden. Elena's mind raced through the implications, understanding now that her father's cruelty, however unforgivable in its execution, had perhaps been born from genuine fear, rather than simple indifference toward her well-being. Why come to me now? Elena asked eventually. If secrecy was so important, why risk revealing all of this? Because silence has already failed, Greta said simply. Your presence here is no longer a secret. The Hollow will learn of it soon, if they have not already. I came because I believe you deserve to understand the true danger you face, rather than remaining blind to threats that could arrive at any moment. Ronan's jaw tightened with barely restrained tension. Then we must prepare accordingly. Elena's safety within my territory has always been a priority, but this information changes the scope of precautions necessary going forward. Elena turned to him, searching his expression for any sign of doubt or hesitation, now that the stakes had grown so much larger and more dangerous than either of them had initially realized. She found none, only steady determination that matched the fierce protectiveness she had come to recognize in him over the past week. You do not have to continue protecting me, Elena said quietly. This danger, this group hunting bloodlines like mine, it is not your burden to carry. It became my burden the moment I found you in that forest, Ronan replied firmly, and it remains my burden regardless of the risks involved. I do not abandon those under my protection, Elena, especially not those who mean as much to me as you have come to mean in such a short time. Greta watched this exchange with an expression that shifted from guilt toward something like cautious hope. Perhaps then, fate has guided you toward exactly the protection you need, even through such painful circumstances. Elena considered this, turning the events of the past week over in her mind, from the devastating humiliation at the altar to the strange, undeniable pull that had guided her toward Ronan's protection in the depths of an unfamiliar forest. Perhaps her father's desperate, misguided attempt to save her had inadvertently pushed her directly into the one place capable of offering the strength and protection she truly needed. "I need time to process everything you have told me," Elena said finally, meeting Greta's eyes with a complicated mixture of lingering anger and reluctant understanding. "But thank you for finally telling me the truth, even if it arrived far later than it should have." Greta nodded, rising slowly from the bench. "I hope in time you might find some measure of forgiveness for your father as well. He is not a cruel man, Elena, merely a frightened one who chose the wrong method of protecting what he loves most." As Greta departed the garden, Elena remained seated, absorbing the full weight of everything she had learned. The danger surrounding her had grown far larger than a simple family secret or a broken engagement. Powerful enemies now knew, or would soon know, exactly where to find her, and the only shield standing between her and whatever came next was the Alpha King beside her, whose growing devotion to her safety showed no sign of wavering, despite the mounting risks. The days following Greta's visit transformed the atmosphere within the stronghold entirely. Where Elena had once wandered freely through quiet corridors and peaceful gardens, she now noticed increased patrols along every wall, additional warriors stationed at the gates, and a palpable tension that seemed to hum beneath the surface of daily routines. Ronan called a meeting of his most trusted advisors within days of learning about the threat posed by the Hollow, and Elena, though initially hesitant, insisted on attending. She was tired of being protected from information that directly concerned her own safety, and Ronan, to his credit, did not argue against her presence. "What do we know about their methods?" Ronan asked, addressing Sophia and several other senior warriors gathered around the long table in his study. "Historically, they operate through careful infiltration, rather than direct assault," Sophia explained, spreading several worn maps across the table's surface. "They identify vulnerabilities within a territory's defenses, often using bribed informants or sympathetic pack members who believe their cause justified. So they are already among us, potentially," Elena said, unable to keep the unease from her voice. "It is possible," Sophia acknowledged carefully, "which is why we have begun quietly investigating anyone within the stronghold whose loyalty might be questioned, particularly those who joined our ranks more recently." Ronan's expression remained grim throughout the discussion, his usual composed authority tightening into something harder, more calculating. "We cannot afford complacency here. If the Hollow believes Elena's bloodline offers them the advantage they have sought for generations, they will not hesitate to act decisively once they confirm her location." "What advantage exactly?" Elena asked. "I still do not fully understand what makes this bloodline so valuable to them." One of the older advisors, a quiet man named Edwin who had served Ronan's family for decades, finally spoke, his voice measured and thoughtful. "The old stories suggest that bloodlines like yours carry an ability to strengthen the bond between mates beyond what typical connections achieve. Some believe this strengthened bond can be manipulated, or even weaponized, if captured and controlled by someone with sufficiently dark intentions." The implication settled uncomfortably over the room. Elena's stomach twisted at the thought of her own nature being viewed as a tool rather than simply a part of who she was, something to be exploited rather than respected. "They would seek to force a bond," Ronan said quietly, understanding dawning across his features with visible horror, "using Elena's bloodline to create connections that serve their own purposes, regardless of her consent." "It is possible," Edwin confirmed grimly. "Which is precisely why her safety must remain our highest priority moving forward." The meeting continued for hours, strategizing defensive measures, discussing which territories might offer safe passage should the stronghold's location become compromised, and reviewing every possible vulnerability the Hollow might exploit. By the time the discussion finally concluded, exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone present, though a clear plan had at least begun taking shape. Later that evening, Elena found Ronan alone in the training yard, practicing alone beneath the fading light of dusk, his movements sharp and precise despite the visible fatigue etched into his expression. "You should rest," she said, approaching slowly. "I could say the same to you." He lowered his weapon, breathing heavily from exertion. "How are you managing everything we learned today?" "Honestly, I am terrified," Elena admitted, surprising herself with the vulnerability of the confession. Not simply for myself, but for everyone here who has been drawn into danger because of my presence. Ronan crossed the distance between them, his expression softening considerably. None of us regret the choice to protect you, Elena. Please do not carry guilt for circumstances entirely beyond your control. How can I not? My father's fear, misguided as his methods were, was not unfounded. This danger is real, and it followed me directly to your doorstep. Danger follows every leader eventually, Ronan said gently. That is simply the nature of holding power and influence across these territories. You did not create this threat, Elena. You are merely the latest target of an evil that has existed long before either of us was born. Elena studied him carefully, noting the exhaustion visible beneath his composed exterior, the weight of responsibility he carried, not only for his own pack, but now for her safety as well. I worry that protecting me will cost you more than you realize. Some things are worth the cost, Ronan said simply, reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly tender given the gravity of their conversation. You are worth the cost, Elena. I hope, in time, you come to believe that as fully as I already do. Warmth spread through her chest, despite the fear still coiled tightly within her. A warmth she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Certainly not from anyone within her own pack who had claimed to care for her welfare. She found herself leaning slightly into his touch, before catching herself, uncertain how much of this connection stemmed from the bond the old text described, and how much stemmed from genuine, growing affection, built through shared experience over the past 2 weeks. I do not know how to separate what I feel toward you from what this bond might be influencing within me, she confessed quietly. How do I know these feelings are truly my own? It was a fair question, one Ronan clearly took seriously, rather than dismissing outright. The bond, from everything I have read, does not create feelings that did not already exist within us naturally. It simply strengthens and clarifies connections that would have formed regardless, given time and opportunity. What you feel toward me, whatever it may be, is entirely your own, Elena. The bond has merely helped us recognize it more quickly than we might have otherwise. His answer eased some of her uncertainty, though the complexity of everything unfolding around her remained overwhelming. She had lost her entire world only weeks ago, only to find herself standing at the center of an ancient conflict she barely understood, protected by a man whose growing devotion to her felt both wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Whatever happens next, she said finally, I am grateful you found me that night in the forest. As am I, Ronan replied, his gaze holding hers, with an intensity that made her breath catch. Whatever the Hollow intends, whatever danger lies ahead, know that I will not allow anyone to take you from the safety you have finally found here. The promise settled deep within her chest, a foundation of certainty amid so much surrounding uncertainty. Elena did not know what battles awaited them in the days and weeks ahead, but standing beside Ronan in the quiet training yard, watching the last light of dusk fade into darkness, she allowed herself to believe, however cautiously, that she was no longer facing the world alone. Neither of them noticed the shadow that lingered briefly near the edge of the training yard, before disappearing silently into the night, carrying word of everything witnessed back toward masters who had waited patiently for confirmation of exactly what they had long suspected. The bloodline had been found, and the Hollow would not wait much longer to act. The attack came on a night when the moon hung full and heavy over the stronghold, casting silver light across walls that had stood undisturbed for generations. Elena woke to the sound of horns blaring across the courtyard, sharp and urgent, followed almost immediately by shouts of alarm echoing through every corridor. She scrambled from bed, pulling on the practical clothing Sophia had insisted she keep nearby, in case of exactly this kind of emergency, her heart hammering against her ribs as the sounds of chaos grew louder outside her window. Ronan burst through her door moments later, already dressed for battle, his expression fierce, with focused determination. They are attacking the eastern wall. Sophia will take you to the safe chamber beneath the main hall. No. Elena's refusal came immediately, surprising even herself with its certainty. I am not hiding, while you and everyone else here risks their lives because of me. Elena, this is not the time to argue. I am not arguing. I am telling you that I refuse to be treated like something fragile that must be protected from every difficulty, while everyone else fights on my behalf. She met his gaze steadily despite the fear coursing through her. Teach me, right now, in whatever time we have, teach me how to defend myself properly. Ronan hesitated only a moment before nodding, understanding perhaps that arguing further would waste precious time neither of them could afford. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I instruct, and trust your instincts. They are stronger than you realize. They moved together through the chaotic corridors, joining warriors rushing toward the eastern defenses, where the sounds of battle had grown to a deafening roar. Elena had never witnessed true combat before, and the sight that greeted them as they emerged into the courtyard stole the breath from her lungs entirely. Dozens of unfamiliar warriors pressed against the stronghold's defenses, their movements coordinated with unsettling precision that spoke of extensive planning rather than impulsive aggression. Ronan's warriors fought valiantly, but the sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm even their disciplined defense. The Hollow, Ronan said grimly, his hands tightening into fists as he assessed the scene before them. They came sooner than we anticipated. A group of attackers broke through the eastern line, moving with clear purpose directly toward where Elena stood beside Ronan. She realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that they were not simply attacking the stronghold at random. They were hunting her specifically. Behind me, Ronan commanded, shifting his stance protectively as the group approached, their leader a tall, cold-eyed man, whose expression carried none of the hesitation Elena might have hoped for. Alpha King, the leader called out, his voice carrying easily across the chaos surrounding them. Hand over the girl, and we will withdraw peacefully. Resist, and this battle will only grow bloodier than necessary. You will receive nothing from me, Ronan replied, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, despite the danger surrounding them. Turn back now, or face the consequences of trespassing on my territory. The leader's expression twisted into something between amusement and contempt. Brave words, considering the numbers currently arrayed against you. Elena felt Ronan tense beside her, preparing for whatever confrontation was about to unfold. She thought of everything she had learned over the past weeks, every lesson about trusting her own instincts, every reminder that she was stronger than the fear currently threatening to overwhelm her. She would not simply stand behind him and wait to be captured like some helpless prize. As the attackers surged forward, Elena felt something shift within her, a wave of heat spreading through her chest and down through her limbs, unlike anything she had experienced before. Her vision sharpened, sounds grew clearer, and an instinct she had never fully accessed before rose to the surface with startling clarity. She moved before conscious thought could catch up, ducking beneath the swing of an approaching attacker, and countering with a strike that caught him off balance, sending him stumbling backward with far more force than she believed herself capable of generating. Ronan glanced toward her, surprise flickering briefly across his features before determination replaced it entirely. The bond, he called out, fighting off another attacker as he spoke. It is awakening your strength. Elena did not have time to fully process the implication before another attacker closed in, and instinct once again guided her movements, each strike landing with precision that felt both foreign and, somehow, deeply familiar, as though some ancient part of her had simply been waiting for permission to finally emerge. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though Elena would later learn it lasted less than 30 minutes before Ronan's forces, bolstered by reinforcements from a neighboring pack that had responded to urgent messages sent earlier that evening, finally began turning the tide decisively against the invaders. The Hollow's leader, recognizing the shifting balance of the confrontation, called for retreat, though not before locking eyes with Elena one final time, a promise of future confrontation clear in his cold gaze. This is not finished, he called out, as his remaining warriors withdrew into the darkness beyond the stronghold's walls. You cannot hide forever. Elena stood breathless in the aftermath, her body trembling with the after-effects of adrenaline, and the strange, awakened strength that had carried her through the confrontation. Ronan crossed to her immediately, concern evident despite the exhaustion visible in his own posture. Are you hurt? No, Elena said, though her voice carried disbelief at her own survival, at the strength she had somehow accessed when it mattered most. I do not understand what happened. How did I fight like that? The bond between us, Ronan explained, gently examining her for injuries, despite her assurance that she remained unharmed. It seems your instincts and abilities strengthen in moments of true danger, particularly when I am fighting alongside you. The old texts mentioned this possibility, though I confess, I did not expect to witness it so soon, or under such dangerous circumstances. Around them, warriors began the somber work of tending to the wounded and assessing the damage the attack had caused. Sophia approached, her expression grim, but relieved, to find both Ronan and Elena standing, despite the chaos of the night. "We held them off," Sophia reported, though not without cost. Several warriors were injured, though thankfully none fatally. The eastern wall requires significant repair before it will hold against another assault of similar scale. "They will return," Ronan said grimly, surveying the damage surrounding them. "The Hollow does not simply abandon a target once they have committed this deeply to pursuing it." Elena felt the weight of that truth settle heavily over her exhausted body. The danger she represented, however unwillingly, had already cost innocent warriors injury, and nearly cost them far worse. Guilt threatened to overwhelm the relief of having survived the confrontation. "Perhaps I should leave," she said quietly. "If my presence here continues drawing this kind of danger toward your people, perhaps it would be better for everyone if I sought protection elsewhere." Ronan's expression hardened immediately, fierce refusal evident in every line of his exhausted face. "Absolutely not. Running will not protect you, Elena. It will only leave you vulnerable, without the strength and support you need to face whatever comes next. We fight this battle together, or not at all." Elena searched his eyes, finding nothing but unwavering resolve, despite the exhaustion and danger surrounding them both. Whatever fear lingered within her about the cost of remaining, it could not outweigh the certainty she felt standing beside him, having just discovered strength within herself she had never known existed. "Together then," she said finally, exhaustion and determination mingling in her voice. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Ronan's hand found hers amid the wreckage of the battle they had just survived, his grip firm and reassuring, despite everything still uncertain about the future. Around them, the stronghold began the slow process of recovery, preparing itself for whatever confrontation still awaited in the days ahead, while somewhere beyond the damaged walls, the Hollow retreated to regroup, their determination to claim Elena's bloodline, undiminished by their temporary defeat. In the days following the attack, word of the confrontation spread rapidly across every territory, carried by messengers and warriors alike who had witnessed firsthand the strength Elena had displayed during the battle. What had once been whispered rumors about the abandoned bride sheltered within the Alpha King's stronghold, now transformed into something closer to legend, a story of resilience and awakening power that captured the attention of pack leaders throughout the region. Among those who heard the news was Damien Voss, sitting alone once again in his study, staring at reports detailing his daughter's survival against forces he had spent decades fearing on her behalf. Guilt and relief warred within him in equal measure, along with a growing recognition that his attempts to protect Elena through secrecy and cruelty had ultimately failed to shield her from exactly the danger he had feared most. He arrived at Ronan's stronghold 3 days after the attack, traveling alone, without the emissaries or formal entourage that had accompanied his previous attempts at contact. When word reached Elena that her father waited at the gates, requesting an audience, she felt a complicated storm of emotions rise within her, anger and lingering hurt, tangled together, with a cautious curiosity about what he might finally have to say. "You do not have to see him," Ronan reminded her gently, as they stood together near the main hall, awaiting her decision. "Whatever he has to say can wait, if you are not ready." "No," Elena said, drawing a steadying breath. "I need to hear this directly from him. I need to finally understand everything, not through second-hand explanations from Greta or ancient texts, but from the man who made these decisions himself." When Damien entered the hall, he looked older than Elena remembered, his usual composed authority replaced by something closer to exhaustion and genuine remorse. He hesitated near the entrance, clearly uncertain of his welcome, before finally approaching where Elena stood beside Ronan. "Elena," he said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "I am listening," Elena replied, her voice carefully controlled despite the turmoil churning beneath the surface. "Explain yourself. All of it. I deserve nothing less, after everything you have put me through." Damien nodded, accepting the demand without argument. "Everything Greta told you was true. I learned of your mother's bloodline shortly after we married, long before you were born. I spent years living in fear that someone would discover the truth and use it against our family, against you. once you grew old enough for the danger to become relevant. So you decided the solution was humiliating me publicly, rather than simply explaining the danger and helping me understand how to protect myself. I know now that was a mistake, Damien said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. When I learned that negotiations for your marriage to Grant had somehow reached the ears of the Hollow, panic overtook my judgment entirely. I believed that severing all connection to you publicly, immediately, would convince them you held no value worth pursuing, that our family had disowned you completely. Instead, you pushed me directly into the path of the one person capable of offering the protection I actually needed, Elena said, glancing briefly toward Ronan, before returning her attention to her father. Do you understand the irony of that outcome? I do, Damien admitted, and I have spent every day since that terrible wedding, wondering whether my desperate attempt to protect you ultimately caused far more harm than any alternative I might have chosen instead. Elena studied her father carefully, searching for the man who had once, long ago, before the weight of secrets and fear had hardened him into someone she barely recognized, held her gently as a child, and promised to always keep her safe. She found traces of that man still present beneath the exhaustion and guilt, though the years of deception had clearly taken their toll. I do not know if I can forgive you, she said honestly. Not entirely, not yet. What you did to me at that altar, in front of everyone I had ever known, caused a wound I do not believe will fully heal for a very long time. I do not expect immediate forgiveness, Damien said quietly. I only hope, in time, you might come to understand that everything I did, however poorly executed, came from a place of desperate love, rather than genuine cruelty. Elena considered this, weighing the truth of his words against the lingering pain of that public humiliation, the memory of standing alone in the dirt, while an entire pack turned their backs on her without explanation. I need time, she said finally. Time to process everything, to decide what role, if any, you will play in my life moving forward. That is more than fair, Damien said, accepting her answer with visible relief, despite its uncertainty. He turned then toward Ronan, something like gratitude flickering across his weathered features. Thank you, Alpha King, for protecting my daughter when I failed to do so myself, however unintentionally. I did not protect her out of obligation, Ronan replied evenly. I protected her because her well-being matters to me deeply, and will continue mattering regardless of whatever relationship you and she eventually rebuild. Damien nodded, understanding the implication clearly. Then I hope, in time, you will allow me the opportunity to earn back some measure of trust, both from Elena and from yourself. As Damien prepared to depart, having said everything he had traveled to say, Elena found herself calling out unexpectedly, surprising even herself with the words that followed. Father, wait. He turned back, hope flickering cautiously in his expression. The Hollow will not stop pursuing me, Elena said. If you truly wish to help protect me now, perhaps you might share whatever additional information you possess about their methods, their leadership, anything that might help us prepare for whatever comes next. Relief washed visibly across Damien's face at the opportunity to offer meaningful help rather than simply carrying guilt from a distance. Anything I know, I will share gladly, whatever it takes to help keep you safe. Over the following hours, Damien shared decades of accumulated knowledge about the Hollow's history, their methods, and the identities of several key figures within their organization that he had learned of through his own decades-long efforts to protect Elena's secret. Ronan's advisors listened intently, gathering crucial information that would prove instrumental in preparing proper defenses against future attacks. By the time Damien finally departed the stronghold that evening, something had shifted subtly between father and daughter. Not complete forgiveness, not yet, but the fragile beginning of understanding that might eventually grow into something resembling reconciliation, given enough time and continued effort on both sides. Elena watched him disappear down the path leading away from the stronghold, feeling lighter than she had in weeks, despite the uncertainty still surrounding her future. Ronan came to stand beside her, his presence steady and reassuring as always. How do you feel? He asked gently. Uncertain, Elena admitted, but perhaps, for the first time since the wedding, hopeful as well. Hopeful that whatever comes next, I will not be facing it through secrets and silence, but through honesty and genuine support. That is a meaningful shift, Ronan said, his hand finding hers as they stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. And whatever challenges the Hollow still intends to bring, we will face them with far more strength now than we possessed even a week ago. Elena leaned slightly into him, drawing comfort from his steady presence, and allowed herself to believe, cautiously but genuinely, that the broken pieces of her old life were finally beginning to reassemble themselves into something stronger and more authentic than anything she had known before. Weeks passed following her father's visit, weeks filled with careful preparation as Ronan's forces worked tirelessly to strengthen the stronghold's defenses against whatever the Hollow intended next. Elena spent much of that time training alongside experienced warriors, learning to harness the awakened strength that had first emerged during the battle, gradually growing more confident in abilities she had never known she possessed. The information her father provided proved invaluable, allowing Ronan's advisors to identify weaknesses within the Hollow's own organization, alliances that could potentially be turned, and warning signs that might indicate another assault was approaching. Neighboring packs, hearing of the growing threat, began offering support as well, recognizing that an organization capable of hunting rare bloodlines across territories represented a danger to everyone, not simply to Elena alone. The final confrontation, when it came, arrived not through another desperate assault on the stronghold, but through a carefully coordinated effort between Ronan's forces and allied packs, who tracked the Hollow's remaining leadership to a hidden encampment deep within contested territory. Elena insisted on joining the confrontation, and this time, Ronan did not argue against her involvement, recognizing the strength and determination she had cultivated over the preceding weeks. Together, they led a combined force toward the encampment as dawn broke across the horizon, determined to end the threat permanently rather than continuing to live under its constant shadow. The confrontation, when it unfolded, proved decisive. Faced with overwhelming numbers and coordinated strategy, the Hollow's remaining forces surrendered. Rather than continuing a fight, they had no realistic chance of winning. Their leader, the same cold-eyed man who had confronted Elena during the earlier attack, was captured and brought before Ronan and the assembled allied leaders to answer for decades of hunting innocent bloodlines across every territory. "This is not truly finished," the leader spat, even as he stood restrained before them. "There will always be others who understand the value of what she represents." "Perhaps," Ronan replied evenly, "but they will understand as well that pursuing her comes at a cost they cannot afford to pay. Today proves that clearly enough." With the Hollow's leadership captured and their organization effectively dismantled across the territories, a measure of peace finally settled over Elena's life that she had not experienced since long before her wedding day disaster. The danger that had shadowed her for weeks began to recede, replaced gradually by the simple, quiet joy of building a genuine future alongside the man who had never wavered in his commitment to her safety and happiness. Her relationship with her father continued healing slowly, built through consistent effort and honest communication, rather than the secrets and silence that had once defined their bond. He visited the stronghold regularly in the months that followed, gradually rebuilding trust through patience and genuine remorse, rather than empty promises. And her relationship with Ronan deepened steadily as well, growing from the strange, fated bond that had first drawn them together into something far more personal and meaningful, built through shared trials, honest conversation, and a mutual respect that neither of them had expected to find so completely within another person. On a clear autumn morning, nearly 6 months after that devastating wedding day, when her entire world had seemed to collapse around her, Elena stood once again at an altar, though this time, the setting felt entirely different from the humiliation and heartbreak she had endured before. This altar stood within Ronan's own territory, surrounded not by a pack that had turned their backs on her, but by warriors and allies who had fought alongside her, by her father, finally present with genuine pride rather than fear coloring his expression, and by Ronan himself, waiting for her with an expression of open, unguarded devotion that stole the breath from her lungs entirely. "You do not have to do this if any doubt remains," Ronan murmured as she reached him, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "I meant what I told you months ago. Whatever choice you make regarding our future belongs entirely to you." "I know," Elena replied, a genuine smile spreading across her face, for what felt like the first time in longer than she could remember. "And this is my choice, freely made, without fear or obligation weighing upon it. I choose you, Ronan Blackthorn, not because ancient bloodlines demanded this outcome, but because you have proven yourself worthy of that choice, again and again, since the very night you found me broken in that forest. Ronan's eyes shone with emotion he rarely allowed himself to display so openly, his usual composed authority softening entirely into something achingly tender. Then I choose you as well, Elena Voss, today and every day that follows, for exactly the same reasons. As they exchanged vows before the gathered witnesses, Elena felt none of the hollow dread that had haunted her first attempt at marriage, replaced instead by a warmth and certainty that settled deep within her chest, steady and unshakable. This was not a match arranged through political necessity or family obligation. This was a bond, chosen freely, strengthened through genuine love and mutual respect, built across months of shared hardship and quiet devotion. When the ceremony concluded and cheers erupted from the assembled crowd, Ronan pulled her close, his forehead resting gently against hers as the celebration continued around them. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," Elena answered immediately, certainty ringing clear in her voice. "For the first time in my life, I finally feel as though I belong exactly where I am meant to be." Later that evening, as celebrations continued throughout the stronghold, Elena stood on a quiet balcony, overlooking the territory that had become her true home, watching stars emerge across the darkening sky. Ronan joined her there, wrapping his arms gently around her as they stood together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about that night in the forest?" she asked eventually. "How different everything might have turned out if you had not found me." "Often," Ronan admitted. "Though I prefer to focus on what did happen rather than what might have been. Fate, or perhaps simple chance, brought us together exactly when we needed each other most." Elena turned in his arms, meeting his gaze with the same quiet certainty that had guided her through every difficult choice over the preceding months. "My old pack abandoned me at that altar, believing they were protecting themselves from the consequences of what I represented. But in doing so, they gave me something far more valuable than anything they could have offered by keeping me." "What is that?" "The chance to discover exactly who I truly am, without the weight of their expectations defining every choice I made," Elena said softly, "and the chance to build a life with someone who values me not for the power my bloodline represents, but simply for who I am underneath it all." Ronan pressed a gentle kiss against her forehead, his arms tightening slightly around her as the stars continued emerging overhead. "Whatever brought us together, I am simply grateful every day that it did. You transformed my life as thoroughly as I hope I transformed yours." Standing together beneath the vast, star-filled sky, surrounded by the territory and people who had become her true family, Elena finally understood that the devastating abandonment she had suffered months ago had not destroyed her future after all. It had simply cleared the path toward a destiny far greater and more genuine than anything she could have imagined, standing at that first, hollow altar. The Alpha King had changed her fate without a single word spoken that fateful night in the forest, offering nothing but quiet, unwavering presence when she needed it most. And in return, Elena had discovered a strength within herself, capable of reshaping not only her own future, but the safety and well-being of countless others who might otherwise have fallen victim to the same ancient dangers that had once threatened to consume her entirely. Together, they faced whatever future still awaited them, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges arose, they would meet them not as two separate individuals bound by fate alone, but as true partners, chosen freely, and loved completely, exactly as it was always meant to be.